Want to do a little exercise here on how to get more out of your data. So on the left side, I have a couple questions that people could include in their survey, but they are asked in a way that is very extreme in the sense that it's black or white, yes or no. And above all, they don't really have a very high measurement level. They're usually just nominal. So remember when I said in the previous class that you're always going to try to ask your questions or measure your variables in the highest possible measurement level. So for example, interval or ratio scales are better than nominal or ordinal measurement levels. So whenever you can, try to adopt a higher measurement level. So let's see how we can improve all these statements on the left. Do you shut down your laptop every time you're done using it for the day? This is a yes or no question. It's not going to give you very much information. It literally forces people to pick between yes and no. Yes as in like yes every time, and no, that could still mean they still do it regularly, but it kind of lumps together everyone who doesn't do it every time. So that's very limited. This is what I would do. I would ask, how often do you shut down your laptop when you're done using it for the day? Just a suggestion. This way you actually have ordinal measurement level, which gives you more insight into how often. You have more nuance in terms of how often they shut down their laptop when they're done using it for the day. Next one, what was the most important factor that convinced you to make this purchase? Again, this question is asked in a way that the measurement level is nominal. It only allows people to identify the most important factor that convinced them to make a certain purchase, but it doesn't give much rich data. You can get more out of your data by asking this on an interval scale. For example, please rate the following factors on their importance, ranging from 1 very unimportant to 7 very important, in convincing you to make this purchase. And you can list a couple of factors, such as, for example, price, quality, design, convenience, and so on, whichever applies to the topic you're studying. But by allowing respondents to rate on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 7, how important each of these factors is, you're going to get an interval measurement level. Did you talk to anybody about college majors before you decided on your major? This is again a yes or no question. It's pretty limiting, so therefore I would suggest you make it into which of the following people did you talk with before about college majors before you decided, and then give a couple options. This way you'll get more insight into whom they talked with. And then lastly, do you always buy your produce through CSA boxes? CSA being community supported agriculture. So again, yes or no question. It puts people in the position of having to pick between extremes, either yes always or no not always, but that could mean a lot of things. So a better way to go about it would be, how often do you buy produce through CSA boxes? This way at least you'll have ordinal measurement level. So this exercise just gives you an idea of how to get more out of your data, how to go from a lower order question that is measured on a lower measurement level to a potentially higher measurement level whenever possible. Of course, sometimes it's not going to be possible. You're still going to have nominal data, but you want to avoid it when you can. So next, I want to discuss a couple do's and don'ts of question design. So the first do to keep in mind is that you want to focus on a single issue or topic per question. Don't try to have multi-layered questions that involve a lot of different things. For example, what type of hotel do you stay in on a trip? Well, kind of depends what sort of trip I'm on, right? If I'm on a conference trip, I might be staying at a nicer hotel, like a conference hotel for work. If I'm on a backpacking trip, I'm obviously staying in a tent. If I am on a road trip, I might stay in whichever motel is along the way. So it really all depends on the type of trip and who I'm with. So you want to specify it more detailed so that respondents know what exactly you are talking about. For example, if you're on a road trip with your friends and stay somewhere along the way, what type of accommodation do you typically use? Another do is to be brief. Maximum 20 words, that's just a rule of thumb, but just keep it short for whatever you're trying to measure. Consider this one. What are the considerations that would come to your mind while you are confronted with the decision to have some type of repair done on the automatic ice maker in your refrigerator, assuming that you noticed it was not making ice cubes as well as it did when you first bought it? Holy schmeck, this is super long. Yeah, you can totally pause the video and try to make this into a shorter question. If the ice maker in your fridge was not working, how would you solve the problem? Pretty straightforward. Next, do. Keep it simple. If you were looking for an automobile that would be used by the head of your household, who is primarily responsible for driving your children to and from school, music lessons, friends' houses, and so on, how much would you and your spouse discuss the safety features of one of the cars you took for a test drive? Again, that's a beast. You want to simplify it, you want to dumb it down, you want to make it shorter. Maybe something like this. Would you and your spouse discuss the safety features of a new family car, or how likely are you and your spouse to discuss, and so on. So how likely could be measured on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 7, 1 being very unlikely, 5 or 7 being very likely. The last do is to make sure your question is very clear. How many children do you have? Well, people can be confused about whether that includes children that are already out of the house, children that have passed away, children that are adopted, or children that are stepchildren, and so on. So you want to make it clear for all respondents so they all interpret it the same way. Otherwise, you're going to get such a variety of answers because they all interpreted it in different ways. For example, how many children under the age of 18 live with you in your home? Sometimes formulating a question more clearly can mean that you have to make it slightly longer. That's a trade-off you make. For each question, think very well about how clear it is, whether it can be formulated more concisely, and whether it's neutral. That brings us to the don'ts. There's a couple things you should absolutely avoid when it comes to question wording. And first of all, that is leading a respondent to a particular answer. Sometimes it's very tempting because you tend to work on projects that you care about. You tend to work on things that your heart is involved in. So still, you want to make sure you abstain from any leading type of questions or any bias in your questions. And there's many ways in which bias can sneak in. Think of, for example, including an answer implicitly in a question. Don't you think fast food has too many calories? By asking it this way, it literally already implies the answer. It already pretty much says it has too many calories. So this is a leading way, a very subtle leading way of asking questions. Or using a certain logic to steer a respondent to an answer. Since most fast food is fried, shouldn't companies put health warnings on their labels? Okay. So you're kind of abusing a fact, a logic, in your advantage to push people towards saying more yes, as like, yes, companies should put health warnings on their labels. Just because that's the kind of goal you want to accomplish is for that to happen, that companies put health warnings on their labels. That doesn't justify you using facts to push people in that direction as well. So be really mindful of that. Also, presuming the truth of an answer. Since McDonald's is the largest food company, shouldn't it set an example for more nutritious meals? Who says McDonald's is the largest food company? You can't just say that because it's convenient for you to steer people in a certain way when it comes to your questionnaire. And there's many more ways in which respondents are led to a particular answer. For example, using unsupported assertions presented as facts. Since everyone buys fast food, shouldn't everyone be concerned about nutrition? Very similar to the previous example I gave. This is, again, you're using an assertion or an assumption to push people in a certain direction. Or you can even use supported facts and abuse those. Since studies have shown that overweight children eat fast food, shouldn't kids' meals be healthier? Even if there are indeed studies that have shown this particular fact, and even if you cite those studies, still you don't want to be using that in a questionnaire because it literally leads respondents to a certain answer. You're basically pushing them in a certain direction again. Or presenting your opinions as facts. Do you agree that too little money is spent on the highly necessary health education of children? Okay. Even if you feel very strongly about this issue, still you shouldn't be presenting your opinion as a fact. And there's a couple more. Creating awareness about the sponsor of the study, as in, will you participate in this study about the dangers of fast food? If you have a question like this, or a statement like this at the beginning of your survey, right? When you welcome people to your survey, you say a few words and you tell them who was sponsoring the study or what's the purpose of the study, that in itself can create a bias or can create a leading situation as well. Or creating awareness of the sponsor of the study from the get-go. If you mention that in the beginning, the survey was sponsored by Weight Watchers, people are going to be more alert. People are going to be more apprehensive of the fact that they should be answering in a socially desirable way, answering by representing themselves as more healthy than they actually are, or adopting a more healthy diet than they actually do. So this again is leading. Or using preceding questions to set up assumptions. Since you have agreed that fast food consumption contributes to obesity, shouldn't fast food companies take responsibility? So let's say a respondent in a previous question clicked yes, I agree that fast food consumption contributes to obesity. Still, you can't use that answer that they gave on a previous question and hold it against them on a later question. That's also leading. The second don't in questionnaire design or question wording would be to use loaded or dramatic wording. So avoid any biased questions that tap into emotions and interferes or abuse universal beliefs. Think of, for example, do you think tobacco companies should have more explicit warnings for people suffering from horrible deadly diseases like lung cancer? Wowza, that's unnecessary. You do not need to create so much drama in a questionnaire. It's not necessary to mention these words of horrible deadly diseases just to give more power and more shebang to your statement. That's very loaded. Or would you buy sunglasses that protect your precious eyes from harmful ultraviolet rays that cause blindness? That's over the top. That's too much drama, too many loaded words in one sentence to be using this in a questionnaire. You could, for example, change this and ask, how likely are you to buy sunglasses to protect your eyes? That's pretty straightforward. You don't want to be adding all these loaded dramatic words. And again, I have some real world examples. If you think this doesn't happen in reality, think again. I took a couple more screenshots of that same survey that I found from the GOP. And the first question here, or the second actually in the survey, was, do you believe the caravan of illegal immigrants must, in all caps, be stopped? Yes, no, no opinion, or other, please specify. So with this question, the answer options are not necessarily flawed. It's the way the question is worded. It adds unnecessary drama and loadedness by using the word must in all caps and then using the words illegal immigrants, right? So this is a very loaded way of asking questions, which will in itself push people to certain answers. Or the one on the right. Were your proud, wow, there's even a typo in there. Were your, magnificent. So were you proud of Republicans when they stood united against the vicious liberal mob that tried to destroy Justice Kavanaugh? Okay. The vicious liberal mob that tried to destroy. That is very loaded in many ways. There's no need to be using the words vicious and liberal and destroy in this question here. So again, it happens more often than you think, and it's obviously very problematic when it comes to accuracy and data. Of course, it's also unethical. Another don't is to make double-barreled questions, and double-barreled questions are basically two questions posed into one. Please rate how satisfied you were with the restaurant's food and service. Well, what if you were super satisfied with the food but not with the service? There's not really any way to answer it because the question lumps both together. Or what is your occupational status? Full-time employed, full-time student, part-time student, unemployed, retired. At first sight, it may not seem double-barreled, but actually it is, because if this is not a check all that apply question, if this is a pick one type of question, then respondents might have a hard time choosing because they might be full-time employed and part-time student, or they might be unemployed and full-time student, and other different variations and combinations of these answer options. So a way to avoid it is to, option A would be to make this a check all that apply question where respondents can check multiple boxes instead of just one. Or option B would be to split this question up into two questions, one of them asking about their study status and one about their employment status. So this way people could answer more accurately. And then lastly, make sure you don't ask any irrelevant questions given the topic you're working on. And this has to do with face validity that we talked about at the end of the previous online class. So sometimes if people say they don't, for example, don't have an Instagram account, then don't let them answer questions about how often they use their Instagram account. Let them skip to another question, let them skip over a certain question. So there's techniques you can use in survey design, such as branching, skip logic, display logic, which I'll talk about later, that allow you to jump over certain questions, or at least allow a respondent to jump over certain questions depending on the answers they gave to a previous question. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're designing your questionnaire. No irrelevant questions based on what you're working on.